Welcome to A Financial Advisor and Pastor Walk into a Bar. Trust Issues Part 2. In this episode, Pastor Jason and Benjie, the financial advisor, continue the conversation about trusting God and what does that look like. Let's listen in.
So that was one of those lessons of trusting him, is just learning to listen to his voice more so than other people's voice,
Right.
and learning to follow his lead more so than looking for the agreement of other people that may not really matter.
Right.
Because not everybody's going to agree with everything you do, especially if you're
Yeah.
doing stuff for God. Not everybody's going to. And so I don't know if any of that makes sense.
You know,
But-
it does, and I think it's we're kind of like chipping away at this, and so we got through one level here, the idea of trust, and you said it's listening, right, to God to just figure out if you're on the right path with what you're doing,
Yeah.
and not listening to what I guess the criticisms that are coming in. I think is a good way to sum that up. So the question that I have now then is, how do you go about trying to listen to his guidance?
Man, that that is an ongoing battle.
Yeah.
The things in my life, and this is not, I don't think any of this is like one-stop shop, rinse and repeat. It's the same thing for everybody. I believe everybody goes about it differently. For me though, I as I read through scripture and do some Bible studies or teach people or whatever, is I find myself gaining more for myself before I can ever pass anything on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so for me, I have to stay in the Word, because if I don't, it's almost like I'm cutting the phone line between God and I in that sense.
Yeah.
Or cutting, the ability to download, his information.
Right.
Secondly, is just spending time in prayer. I was at a campus pastors conference a couple weeks ago in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that one of the campus pastors that I was in a small group with, he talked about is he wanted to begin giving 1% of his day directly to God. He's like, if God's given me everything, I just need to start with 1%.
Okay.
So 1% of my day is 14 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's like, I need to start like undevoted or distracted, undivided time devoted strictly to God. And to me, that just kind of hit, because I'll do my Bible study and I'll pray, or I'll just spend some time, just kind of thinking about things and praying with him. But for some reason, this idea of just undivided, devoted time, 14 minutes, I was like, oh, I don't even know if I do that. Yeah. Of just sitting, trying to sit in his presence and just listen.
I'd fall asleep.
Yeah, exactly. But I've always done like, well, I'll make that time my Bible time, my reading time or whatever.
Yeah.
And this was a new encouragement and challenge. And I wish I could say that since that time I've done it every day, and I haven't, but I'm working at it.
Yeah.
But just apart from reading the Bible, apart from thinking or whatever, or praying, just having 14 minutes every day to just sit with undivided time where there's going to be no distractions.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm going to put like a little disclaimer thing that I'm typically on the negative side of stuff when we talk.
Oh,
really?
really?
I think that's fair for me to say that. But here's a positive note. And just for this next few seconds, the example I said I'd fall asleep. I'm pretty sure I'd fall asleep probably after 2 minutes. Probably 5 years ago, to pray in the morning when I get up, fall asleep automatically. As soon as I get down and I start praying and I start thinking about things, maybe my mind runs and all of a sudden it just disappears and I'm out. And I would do that in bed, right? I obviously fall asleep then. So I get out of bed and then I'd pray on my knees, and I end up falling asleep on my knees. And I think, I can't do this. This isn't going to work. So I moved the prayer time to the afternoon, you know? And so at least I'm a little bit more up. The problem is that my mind, since I'm up, my mind's racing.
Busy.
Right?
Yep.
So, but just making that move, and then I eventually calmed my mind down, I think, right? And then I started to go back into the morning, and eventually I stop falling asleep.
Mm.
At least, to where I know when I will start to fall asleep. So I end my prayer before that happens. And then I go into something that's a little bit more structured, which is like a Bible reading or a Bible devotional, something. But collectively, that time with God went from, falling asleep in less than a minute to maybe about 15 minutes in the morning that I end up going through prayer time and Bible study. And that's, I think I'm sharing that as an example of in the scripture where it says, if you pursue him, then he will come to you.
James 4:7-8 Submit therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded.
Right. And that's kind of an example where I'm thinking that I'm pursuing him and making a honest effort to pursue him. And the time to expand my experience with him was opened up because I didn't give up, and I continued to go and say, all right, I'm still trying to go after you. Let me try this day. Let me try this night. Let me try 3 minutes. Let me try something. So if you're not able to go and do, I think God will honor your effort of trying to go and pursue him, undivided attention. And that's a good idea in terms of approach, because I think of what you said with prayer time, Bible time. And I think, okay, so there's a lot of time. I go to Bible studies during the day. I go and network with Christian business guys, and we talk about the Bible and stuff. But how much of that time is really, solely devoted to him, right? And I don't know. If I can say, it's more than 14 minutes, right?
No, because the reality is there's time with God, and there's time about God.
Yeah.
And I think we do. Or let me say me, I'll just put myself on the anvil there. I do a good job of things about God.
Yeah.
I don't always do the best job of things with God. And there's those moments where I recognize that. I'm like, man, I need to do better with him.
Yeah.
And it's not about earning anything. It's not about working harder. It's not anything. It's just simply, I need to do a better job of just spending time with him. Because just as I want my, I want my kids to come and seek me out on things, just so that way I can speak into their life. And, my boys, my girl will never know all that I want for them if they never come ask me.
Yeah.
If they'll never receive anything, not never. They won't receive as much if they don't come ask me for what I have to share with them.
Yeah.
And I think God's the same way. Not that he wants to, not that he chooses to withhold, because he can bless if he wants.
Yeah.
But he's like, hey, I think in passage of scripture, knock and the door will be open, seek and you shall find.
Matthew 7:7-8 Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened.
All you have to do is just go seek him out, and he's ready and he loves you.
Yeah.
He's not going to force himself on you either. So,
yeah. I guess when I think about the going back to the levels and whatnot, and so that's a way to go and trust this idea of devoting specific amount of time, 14 minutes or percentage wise. And does that bridge the gap, I guess? Because it seems like we're talking about trusting by spending time with him. And then there's the other idea of trusting where, if you use the example with money, that always comes to my head because I'm a financial advisor, right? So if you don't have enough money, then the trust factor is that, well, God will take care of you in that expense, or take care of your need, I think is a better way of putting it, right? So does that translate to go and say, if I spend 14 minutes of my time with you, does that create the trust that's needed in the action of don't worry?
I think it doesn't hurt it.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't hurt it. I think it's not a 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
But I think it does put you in a position, spend that time with him does put you in a position, all of us in a position, where we are able to know him more, understand him more, learn how to trust him more.
Yeah.
Simply because we're submitting ourselves to him and just saying, I want you to speak into my life. I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
And I don't know how trust doesn't grow in those moments when things like that happen, but I definitely don't think it hurts anything either.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
It does, because 2 + 2 I think equals 4 type of logic is not
Doesn't always translate into spiritual matters.
Yeah, it doesn't, because I always think of that. Going back to that money example, I always have this thing in my head where it's just when I run into the problem of money and I have that worry that comes into my head.
Yeah.
It goes along the lines of, okay, well, my balance sheet doesn't add up,
Yeah.
and this is a 1 + 1 problem, and it's not equaling 2. And then a popular thing my wife and I go through when we talk about things is, well, where in the Bible does it say X? Or where in the Bible? And the thing that I remember I was convicted up with this was when I was doing the math problem, and I said, well, this isn't add up. This isn't going to add up. It's not going to add up. Doing forecasting. And then I think in my head, where does it say in the Bible, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2? And feeding 5,000. I mean, that was probably the biggest one that comes to my mind. Well, that doesn't equal, right? Those numbers of 7 fish and
5. Hang on here, 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Okay, I'm getting that mixed up with the 4,000 or something.
Yes, because there was the 2 different times, and I don't remember the numbers on each one, but
yeah. I mean, that's a good example where 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've kind of exhausted that part, because it just seems like it's trust.
Yeah.
And I guess my problem is I just don't trust them. That's kind of basically, I keep saying, yeah, I do, or I will, or yeah, I need to. And I guess the bottom line is I don't. I guess that's fair to say. I don't know. Why is it that I'm having a hard time admitting that? I guess that's the question.
Because we're supposed to. But I think it's those moments of honesty where he's like, all right, let's go. He's like, all right.
Well, what does that mean? Let's go. Because you saying let's get deeper into the water here?
Well, possibly. It's a start. Being realistic is the place to start.
Yeah.
What's the old AA thing? Admitting you have a problem is the first step.
Yeah.
You can't move forward. Even just today, went to a counselor, and that idea, where this is the first time I was meeting with this person. And it's one of those things like, I can pretend like I have everything figured out, or I can be honest.
Yeah.
And if I pretend like I have everything figured out, then why am I in his office? But if I don't have everything figured out, then I need to go to someone who can help me. And of course, not to say that God can't, but I think there's definitely a place for counselors in our lives and spiritual leaders and people like that. And so, God can definitely utilize individuals like that to be a blessing to us. But admitting we have a problem is the first step.
Yeah, the transparency part of it is, I don't even know why that even comes up as an issue, because he knows what's in our heart. So why do I feel like I can do something by hiding it? I guess is the best way to put it, right?
But did you know what was in your heart?
That's a good question. I guess maybe, I'm not aware of the stuff, and there's things that you go through with trials, and that stuff gets fished out once you start going through it, right? But if we're going through that idea of I'm going through the cycle, I'm doing it again. So am I not remembering what's in my heart every time I go through it? Or am I getting to that point where he's just saying, this is in your heart, here we go again, and it's okay, well, you can't learn that lesson.
You can't and I think we can't learn the lessons that God wants us to learn or to grow from if we don't first recognize what the problem is.
Yeah.
And it's, sometimes we try to address the surface level things.
Yeah.
and not the deeper seated heart thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, just simply cutting out pornography from our lives is not really the problem. There's a reason why pornography seems to be, for so many men, there's a reason why pornography seems to be so pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
And so just saying, hey, I'm not going to look at it on TV, movie, you know, magazine, whatever, that's not really addressing the issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's something deeper seated in your heart that needs to be fixed and resolved and healed, learned from. So that way, now watching pornography is no longer a problem.
Okay.
Because you've actually dealt with the issue. You haven't just dealt with the symptom.
Okay.
And I think that's where, you know, sometimes it's a matter of being able to recognize what really is the problem in our lives.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not just that I need to be stronger in the midst of adversity, but no, the problem may really be, and I need to trust him in the midst of adversity.
Yeah.
And so why is it that I'm struggling to trust? Why is it that I'm having a hard time trusting him?
Yeah.
And then working through that and saying, God, you know, help me with this. You know, I even think of a passage in the New Testament, you know, where it's help me with my unbelief. You know,
yeah,
the person recognizes, you know, I believe, help me with my unbelief.
Yeah.
Mark 9:23-24. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately the boy's father cried out and said, I do believe. Help my unbelief.
You know, the person recognizes the issue. The issue is, I have unbelief. Okay, well, why is that? I think there may be some deeper seated issues with that unbelief. Yeah. But why is that? But at least they recognize the issue.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think of going back to the pornography issue. I remember telling this guy who was sharing with me about some of the things that he does to go and help. Okay. And he says he put up this, you know, whatever thing on his phone to go and block things out. Yeah. And my response was, you know, we set up these hurdles and we're saying this hurdle is going to be what is going to keep me. But then the hurdle gets knocked down. So then we get a bigger hurdle. And then we end up having to go and put more hurdles in front of us to keep us from going there. And the commonality in all of them is that we're the one that's doing it. And I asked him, is like, so where is your trust in God in solving this problem when you're the one that's putting the hurdles every time, right? And so are you really trusting God to help you with this? Because he said he would help you, but you're not seeking him out, right? But having that idea, and where I went with that was along the lines of, you know, trying to trust him in that process to go and help. But what it sounds like when you're talking about trying to figure out what the actual issue is that, okay, so we can start along those lines of asking God to help us out, but then he will go and direct us to maybe identifying what this issue is, and then admitting to what that issue is will help us prevent, in this case with pornography, but, you know, insert something else.
Whatever it may be, yeah.
It starts with trust. It's identifying what's in our heart and trying to fix what that is in our heart to prevent us from going into that symptom that you were talking about. And so I'm just curious, what's an example of, you know, in that pornography example, what is something that's in the heart that would have been that needs to be solved in order to go and prevent? I mean, what have you heard? 'Cause I've heard that before, but I've never heard anything identified as something.
For me personally, you know, pornography is something that I believe I have found a lot of healing in my life for, but yet every day is still a day that I have to wake up and go, not today. Mm-hmm. You know, just not today. Not because the temptation has completely fled from me and I never experienced temptation, because the reality is man, it's all around. Mm-hmm. You know, and I can walk down, you know, the street or go to the store or whatever, and there's somebody that's dressed a certain way that would cause me to wonder or whatever. So I just have to fight it and say, you know, not today. For me personally, though, in the midst of that, even though it's still a daily battle, or not a battle, but a daily commitment, when I was going through some of my healing journey, the thing that I really had to recognize in my own life was just my desire for the things that I can't have.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is yes, I am, I'm tempted by a beautiful woman, that tempts me, but it's also that thing that I can't have.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is pornography for me, or even just that lustful temptation, that's reflected in so many areas of my life, even with money.
Yeah.
Wanting something that I can't have.
Right.
I don't have the ability to afford something, but yet I really like that, or a friend of mine has it, or I think it's cool, so I want it. I have a desire in my life, or have had, and continually work through it, of wanting the things that I can't have.
Yeah.
And so when it came to women and females specifically, and what I would just say are beautiful people, beautiful women, it's recognizing that from a godly Christian perspective, I can't have that.
Yeah.
And so even before I was married, that's not my wife. That's, I can't have it, but I really want it. Yeah. And so then it was this heart issue of lusting and longing for something that's not mine.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
That helps.
Because yeah. you can go and substitute the pornography out with
alcohol.
Never say anything. Alcohol.
Copious amounts of alcohol, whatever. Yeah.
You mentioned money, right? And that could be the same thing where you're wanting something that you can't have. And when we talk about money, it's like, well, I want to go and fly to Europe every year, right? And have that kind of a lifestyle, and that's something that you're not able to do, right? And so you continue to go down that path of wanting to do it, and then I guess you end up being obsessed with the means to go and get it, and that's why money becomes a problem. And it goes back to the episodes that we had last year when we talked specifically about money, and it's not. I remember the one about the love of money is not the root of all evil. Money is not the root of all evil. Yep. Yeah, love of money is, right?
1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil, and some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs.
And it's that idea that we start turning these things into idols that compete against God. And that becomes, the big sin as to why it's a problem. It starts off as something that's small and maybe innocuous, and we end up having this snowball effect that goes on.
Yeah. Well, and even, and here I am. I've been in ministry for 16 years now, I believe, since 2008, roughly. Yeah, 16 years. And it took me, I had to do the math for a second, but 16, 17 years. And the thing, even today, I find myself where it is looking at a position within a church, and thinking, man, I could do that. Yeah. I think I have the gifts and the abilities and the mindset, the temperament, whatever. I think I could do that job. Yeah. But it's not my job. It's not my job to have. Right. And so even in a different way, that idea of I want that. Yeah. And I could go force the issue. I could go do some things to potentially get into that job. Right. And man, it may not be the right thing, but it's kind of that whole thing. I want that. And it's something that I can't have, but I want it. Yeah. And for me personally, not that it's this way for everybody, but that is something that I have seen reflected so many different areas of my life, that pornography was just one piece of that. Yeah. But yet that overarching idea of wanting the things that I can't have. Yeah.
I'm thinking of taking that back to what we originally talked about with we're trying to go from one level to the next level to the next level. This idea of growing our faith, just like, weightlifting and increasing the resistance each time. Yeah. And the thought is, so why do I get stuck in doing it again, the same level? I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah. Why am I stuck at level 1 or level 2? I keep going through it. And, what you said makes me think, well, we're trying to go after the things that we don't have or we can't have, that he doesn't want us to have. And it may not even be him saying, no, you're never going to have it. Yeah. Just not right now.
Yeah, timing may be off.
You're not mature enough, or whatever it is. Yeah. But if in that level you're pursuing it and you continually pursue it, or you actually get it and you continually live in it, right? That could contribute to the fact that you're still going through that trial because you've not rectified, maybe letting go of what it is you're chasing after.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That's interesting.
No, I remember one of the ways, kind of looking back on that, I remember this coming up is Michelle and I had bought our first house. We were living in Little Known, Texas. We'd been married for 2 years. We'd moved into this house and we had painted the walls. We'd done the floor. We'd bought couches and different stuff, bought a TV, all those things, had the house, and even bought, it was a 3-bedroom house and we had beds in all 3. We had, furniture in all 3. And I'll never forget, my parents walked in, and Michelle and I are so proud of this house.
Yeah.
And we loved this house, and we'd worked so hard to get it to the place that we'd got it. And we were proud of it. And we wanted to show our parents, and my parents walked in, and I'll never forget my mom just kind of looking around and going, wow, this is really nice, guys. And we're like, yeah, we know.
Yeah.
And then my dad spoke up. My dad goes, man, it took us 20 years to have all this, and y'all have done it in 2. And I just, at one hand, I wanted to just knock him out. I'm like, Dad, shut up, But on the other hand, it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, and I kind of thought about it. I was like, man, my dad's right. We've got a 3-bedroom house and we only have need for 1 room.
Yeah.
And we've got these other 2 bedrooms decked out, and almost instantaneously when we bought the house. And it was just all this idea, this thinking of, man, I have to have all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I have to have this house perfect.
Right.
And looking back on it, it was just kind of this thing of, I wanted the things that I couldn't have.
Yeah.
But I was going to go get them. And thankfully, we did some things wisely to do it. So we didn't put ourselves in a precarious situation financially, but it was just a reflection of that whole thing of, I don't need all this.
Yeah.
And yet I went out and got it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's times in my life where I look back on, I see what God was teaching. And even though he allowed me to experience some of those things, he was teaching me things along the way. So that way, when different stuff comes up, I have the ability to go, oh, I need to reflect on that lesson learned and then apply it. And sometimes I do it well, sometimes I don't, but I think we're all that way.
Yeah, it's probably just part of the process.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I guess it just comes back to the fact I just hate the process. Wish I could do it a different way. And then I just think about my sons, the 2 younger ones, and they're probably thinking the same thing. I hate this process of what you're doing to me. And then I go back, well, then stop doing what you're doing, right? And then
learn from it.
Get convicted and say, well, maybe that's what God's telling me to do. Stop doing what you're doing. Yeah. And we can go on and keep going down the process.
Take those next steps.
Yeah. So
this concludes part 2 of this episode. Remember, Jason and Benjie talk these topics in hopes that you ask questions and open the Bible to find the answers, because God has a message for you, and you won't find it unless you open the Word and read it for yourself. This has been a financial advisor and pastor walk into a bar. Thanks for listening.